So we jump right in with talking about kind of what economics is, right? And the different types of economics. So, we all know that we are in the macroeconomics, right? That's where we're at right now. But we need to know the distinction between the two. And before that, we need to figure out what is economics, right? So economics answers three main questions. What are we going to produce? How are we going to produce it? And then for whom? Who's going to get those goods that we end up producing? And so when we're talking about economics, we split it up into a micro versus macro. So microeconomics focuses on the action of individual agents within the economy. So these individuals we would refer to as a household. So we do this weird thing in economics where instead of talking about people, we oftentimes talk about households. Why do we do this? Right? So part of it has to do with the fact that the decisions that we make regarding our finances or regarding our time, right, which is our two most scarce resources, are oftentimes not just related to ourselves, right? They're related to our spouse, to our parents, to our kids, to our brothers and sisters if we're living with them, right? But definitely to parents when we were living with them back in high school, and then spouses and kids as you get older, right? So we talk about households rather than talk about individual people, but for the most part, you can kind of think as a household as a single entity. Does that make sense? Like a single entity that's a combination of the person, their spouse, their kids, or the person and their parents. Then we're also going to talk about the actions, well, we're not going to, but you will, or you have, of workers, right? So in micro, we talk about workers. Why do workers go to work? What's the wage that's going to incentivize them? How much do we make unemployment to make it so that, people actually work, right? We saw this issue with COVID, right? We had the COVID relief money and it was kind of nationally set, and sometime, there were some people around here that were making more on the COVID relief money than they were actually working, right? And so there was a misalignment of incentives as a result there. And then lastly, right, this is economics, so we are talking a lot about businesses in both macro and in micro, right? We're going to talk a lot about businesses. Now, when we talk about macro, we're talking about broader issues. So we're talking about, one of the ones that we've been feeling only recently, right? For a long time, for a lot of me teaching this subject, inflation was boring. Right? Not anymore, right? We've undergone this, almost double-digit inflation, which is unheard of for an advanced economy like the United States. Now it seems to be, brought back down. It's under control, but understanding what drives that inflation, what are the different measures of inflation, is going to be one of the core tasks or core goals of this course, right? So we're also going to talk about unemployment. Why does unemployment exist? Why is it worse for some people than others? We're going to talk about economic growth. So essentially, there is an expectation every year that we're going to make more, better stuff. That's our expectation in capitalism. We're going to make more, better stuff next year. And the last one, right, which, not as popular, but you may have had some sort of exposure to it, right, within the last, 5 years or something like that, right? There was the kind of trade war that we had with China for a little bit there, right? Our trade balance. All of that imported stuff, all that imported plastic stuff that, was made in China. Funny enough, it actually used to be made in Japan, right? If you talk to your parents' generation, they'll talk about how all of the stuff that's made in China now was made in Japan when they were, kids and coming up, right? So we'll talk a little bit about trade and kind of why the United States is in the position that it is in with our trade imbalance, and whether it's actually a problem, whether it's actually something that we need to take care of, right? Divisive issue. Questions on economics and the distinction between micro and macro?